Now, what is going on in the Conservative Party? I mean, this is one of the biggest, most successful political institutions this country has ever created, if not the most successful political party this country has ever created. And so you kind of thought they were just fixed as part of the furniture. They're always going to be on the scene. The government's either going to be the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, or before that, it was the Tories or the Whigs. They were always there. Well, they're really not anymore, are they? I mean, in some elections, they're slipping down to 4th place. Their membership has absolutely imploded. They've lost 8,000 ever since the leadership election, which installed Kemi Badenoch as the leader of the party. Can it all be salvaged? Or is it just one of those moments in history where, well, things change and change fundamentally and forever? Let's speak now to Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism and, of course, a former MEP. At one point, a Brexit Party MEP, sitting with me and my cohort, and then she snuck off back to the Tories. Naughty girl. Naughty Annunziata. But what is going on? You've seen it from both sides. You know most of the Reform lot because they have emanated, many of them, from the Brexit Party, and you also know a lot of the Tory lot. What is going on? Is this just a case of the Conservatives gradually being replaced by Reform UK, or is there something otherwise fundamentally wrong inside the Conservative Party right now?
I think the real problem with the Conservatives is they've totally lost their way, that their own membership don't really know what they stand for. The voting public haven't a clue, really. And we get these mixed messages between reshuffles and policy announcements that don't seem to match up. And until they do, how can anyone have faith? But what I think could happen and could turn it around is if there's a very, very strong values-led, principles-led policy platform. And if Kemi has got the guts to come out and keep saying things such as reducing the size of the state and the tax burden on normal taxpayers, like Milei has in Argentina, then there is hope, but it might be the most successful political party in the history of the world, not just the UK, but it doesn't owe anyone, no one owes it blind loyalty. And they've got to prove they're worthy of support. And at the moment, I don't think it's clear enough for most people to do so. I am staying with them. I still think they're the best way of achieving really substantive change, that we all know this country is falling to pieces, and I think on the whole, all very, very worried.
We are, indeed.
And it's got to turn around. And I think at the moment, they are the best people, best placed to do that, but not unless they know what they're doing, how they're doing it, and crucially, why.
So this is the difficulty, I think, that faces the Conservative Party. The difficulty now slightly being faced by Reform, because people on the right wing of politics are saying Reform's gone too soft. Oh, you become centrist, you're now an establishment party, because under our voting system, you have to build cohorts of votes. And certainly the Conservative Party, who were at one stage the broad church, seem to have become the broad church without any, any holy book, if you will. And on one side, they've got to cover off hemorrhaging support to the Liberal Democrats in the Shires mainly, where Ed Davey seems to have managed to scoop up a lot of votes just by, I don't know, bimbling about on a jet ski like the absolute numbskull that he is. But on the other hand, they've got to sort of appeal to some of their voters who are looking at Nigel Farage and saying that's more the sort of politics I want to see happen in this country. And that age-old tug of war that has taken place for a long time now between the two competing factions of the Conservative Party is potentially going to be the thing that hurts them again, because they've got to decide which way to pivot.
And that is what happened in the 1970s, when we also had a completely disastrous Labour government that ruined the country financially, but also socially. And you had on the one side the Heathites, who were the Wets, as we began to call them, and they still are within the party. And then you had Thatcher, and Thatcher was prepared to make the lead that you don't gain followers by following them. You gain followers by taking a stance that people can believe in. And that's what we need now. Kemi has been in position for 8 months. She has said she won't have any full policy announcements until later in this parliament. I think we can expect a report on the ECHR and whether we should leave it in October. This has got to be speeded up. not necessarily the detail, because that matters less until there is an election and you can say exactly how you will do things. But the principles that Kemi said, for example, which I fully support, we should not have a target of 2050 for net zero. But she's got to say, does she believe in net zero at all? Or should it be 2051? That you've got to be bold and you've got to take people with you. And I think there's still an opportunity to do that, but it's an ever-diminishing window.
Are the right people, the right power brokers behind the scenes, the people who are going to deliver that? Because, you know, I've never really been in the Conservative Party. I think I had a fleeting moment of membership for all about 2 months because I had a moment of madness. But I know a lot of people who have been in the Conservative Party and been in the Conservative Party a long time and kind of get these things and understand the factions and the power brokers. And someone said to me the other day, well, that's it with Kemi's reshuffle. This is the Gove takeover, fully throated and achieved. And that actually, when you look behind the scenes at some of the staffers and the people who might be writing the policy and determining the direction of travel, they're kind of more from the side of the Conservative Party who, you know, a little bit cuddly, a little bit fuzzy, a little bit Lib Dem. I mean, I don't know if you can shed some light on that. Like I said, I don't know how it works.
I think yes and no. I don't think it was a clear directional reshuffle, and I would have personally wanted a much stronger showing for the proper Tories within the party. But there were some very good moves in there as well. That Neil O'Brien to head up policy at shadow cabinet level, I think is incredibly encouraging, because he is not only very sound on what needs to be done, he's incredibly able at how it can be done. And he's been part of Conservative thinking, well, since we were both in our early 20s, and we're not anymore. But he's got a very good mind, and I think he will grip that very well and sensibly. But the leader needs to lead with a vision. And at the moment, I don't know that we've got that. I think Kemi knows what she stands for, but she hasn't articulated it to the rest of the country. We need to see more of her, and we need to know why she's doing what she's doing.
Is there an argument to say that, you know, it's all a bit too late now? That some people say better late than never, but actually, you know, it's a bit like when you walk past a shop. You look at the window. If you like the wares they're selling, you go through the door. If you don't, the likelihood is you're not going to bother thinking, oh, I'm going to go down that street because I like that shop. You're going to be going to the big shiny one up there that's got the half-price sale and the bog-off offers. And that Kemi has sort of like blown her chance because, you know, she needed to come out the box strong and she didn't. And so she's kind of made her bed.
Well, I think the Conservative Party is pretty well known for not being unwilling to defenestrate its leaders. And I don't think that a challenge is at all impossible.
Oh, so you think she should be...
I think she could prove her value and her leadership skills by setting out her wares, by selling why we need to bring back control away from international courts and to our British democratic system, how we can bring the judges that seem to make these appalling decisions back under control, how we can get the police to police and do take the actions that matter to all of us so that we're safe in our houses and on the streets. If she can do that, if there are people who won't come with her on issues such as net zero, such as the ECHR, potentially, and I would hope, such as tax cuts to encourage growth, then I think she has to be prepared to expel any wets
but the problem is
still there.
And
if she did that, I think she would be able to show, because in opposition you can't change things,
right.
and Reform know this, that you can't actually change what happens in Parliament or how laws are enacted. But what you can do is show that you have the ability and the will to make things change.
I mean, the thing is this as well, though. Kemi just actually actively boasted about not having wares. When they were asked, what was your position on this? Would you leave the ECHR? What do you think about this? She sort of said, I've only just come into power. I want to find my feet. I want to settle down. I want to make up my mind. I'm going to come out of policy as and when. And so you kind of got the feeling that there isn't any real conviction there. And so now if she turns around and goes, guess what? These are my wares. No to net zero, no to the ECHR. It's like, well, those are Reform's wares, and they've said that from the outset. It doesn't...
I don't think that's... I mean, yes, she did certainly say she was going to take her time, formulate detailed policy, blah, blah, blah. And personally, I think that was an error, that she should have set out her values first. But she hasn't been shy about her values at any point. We have all heard so many times, if you have an interest in politics, otherwise you won't have done, but that her fight on women's rights, trans rights, on being a black woman, and that making no difference to her politics, but empowering her to fight more strongly for the politics of this country. That growing up in Nigeria, she saw what socialism did and how absolutely appalling it was for their country. And I don't think any of those principles have ever really been in question. Unfortunately, how she's enacted them has been, and she hasn't kept repeating them. And we all need to keep being reminded of what people stand for.
Yeah, I mean, she's sort of left the playing field. I haven't seen her knocking about for a while. What's she up to?
Well, she's had an absolutely brilliant interview today with one of the broadsheets, where she does say that economically she would be looking to Millet and his famous chainsaws to cut the waste in the state, but also to cut the state's role, which is the crucial part of that, that you can tinker at the edges and get rid of the odd DEI officer. But what you actually need to do is change the role of the state. And I think it's very interesting that she's looking at that, and very encouraging.
I mean,
and would mean that our taxes could come to a level at which we can all, in fact, afford them and afford to still live. She is very much making more and more announcements on actual policies. This review into the ECHR makes it very clear she's completely open to leaving it, regardless of what James cleverly says, which does make his appointment an unusual and unexpected one. But he can be very sound on other issues. Everyone has their strengths, and if they're not going to pull behind the leader, then either she's got to go or they do.
There you go. Brilliant words to end on there. Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism. What is Badenochism? She better decide. She better decide soon.